Hustings for the South East region. I'm Ben Thomas, previously the parliamentary candidate for Brighton Kemp Town and member of the South East Executive, joined on this sunny day by our two candidates, Ed Davey and Layla Moran. We'll be starting off today's hustings with opening pitches from both candidates, each lasting a maximum of 3 minutes, and then we'll move on to questions submitted by you in advance with 2-minute answers from both candidates. It's already been agreed that for today's hustings, Ed will go first, and then subsequently we'll rotate between the two candidates. So without any further ado, we'll move on to the first question. If it's okay with the candidates, I'll show my hand when you have 10 seconds left. Does that work? Okay.
Oh, we're not doing opening statements?
Yes. Oh, sorry, the opening statement, sorry. So Ed, would you like to go first with your 3 minutes?
Well, thank you, Ben. Friends, these are challenging times. With the worst recession for 100 or even 300 years, COVID, Brexit, the climate emergency, our economy and society are being hit hard. I'm the leader for these challenging times. I bring both vision and experience with liberal solutions to tackle today's huge challenges. Take the economy and climate. Too often they've been separate. My Green Economy Recovery Plan combines these challenges to invest in green homes, green transport, green energy. I can deliver this green economy vision because I've experienced doing it before. I fought the Tories on climate and won. In government, I more than trebled the UK's renewable power, with Britain now the world leader in offshore wind. We've the best climate change record of any party. As leader, I work with your local party with a green recovery campaign. But a future greener economy must also be fairer. From working on a universal basic income as Paddy Ashdown's economics advisor, to devising policies like a penny on income tax to invest in education, I've always campaigned for a fairer society. So post-COVID, let's be the voice of carers. The UK has 10 million carers, 3 times as many people who voted Lib Dem in 2019. My own caring experience started as a young carer. Dad died when I was 4. Mum became terminally ill when I was 12. So I nursed her for 3 years till she died. Now Emily and I care for our severely disabled son, John, who needs 24/7 care. So I understand what so many carers go through every day. My life experience helps me relate to people, to voters, and to their challenges. In the general election review, you see our party's challenges, and the conclusion, there are no quick fixes. And the sharpest criticism, people don't know what voting Liberal Democrat means. My vision answers that, a greener, fairer, more caring country. Friends, we can win. I get quality media cut through, like after I forced a commitment from Boris Johnson for an independent inquiry into COVID. And I'm an experienced campaigner. I'm the only MP in our party's history to win without being a target seat. Friends, while times seem tough for our party, remember the first nationwide election under Paddy Ashdown? We scored less than 6%. I remember how Paddy led our rebuilding. Paddy appealed to the moderate Tories we needed to win. And I'm the leader best able to appeal to those moderate Tories today. From my economics and business background to my political experience, from my life experience to my greener, fairer, caring vision, back me as leader, and I'll win over those moderate Conservatives. And we'll win again.
Layla, over to you.
Well, firstly, good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. And some of you watching may well have already voted for our next leader, but if you haven't, then I urge you to seize the moment to change our party's future. Let's move forward together. But let's start by being honest about where we are. As a party, we are in danger of slipping into the realms of irrelevancy. We need a leader who can drag us out of the doldrums of single-figure polling and a council base that has halved in the last 10 years. A more of the same approach just won't cut it. But there is a place for bold liberal ideas in this country. I know, because since the December elections, I've made it my job to understand what matters to members and voters up and down the country. My vision is well informed, and under my leadership, I'd encourage a renewed Liberal Democrat Party to campaign on policies that actually matter to people, that work for regional and national campaigns. People have been badly let down by this government, but particularly in places like the Southeast, from a lack of action on climate change that affects so many coastal communities, to the prospect of building lorry parks in Kent, to appalling lack of reliable transport. We must set ourselves up as the approachable party that can take on this group of charlatans. The three pillars of my campaign are education, the environment, and the economy. By offering solutions that improve people's lives in areas that they care about, we can speak to a broad base of voters and communities again. And we need those messages to really resonate. And it's more important than ever, particularly with critical elections that we have this coming May. And I know how crucial these are going to be. We need to build on the gains that we made in 2019, like in Arran, Guildford and Mull Valley. And we need to get more councillors across the whole region. Our party has some brilliant policies, and it will be my priority as leader to support you in communicating them. I get essential media cut through. Since June, I've had over 400 positive media hits, including several front pages. And I've been in newspapers across the political spectrum, from The Guardian to the Daily Express. I want us to use this together to win over soft Conservatives as well as people leaning towards Labour and the Greens. It's what I did in my own constituency. I gained support from moderate Conservative voters as well as parties on the centre left, and the result was an overturning of a 10,000 Tory majority in one go. In this leadership election, I am the candidate who can move us on from the last decade, rebuild trust and power a political comeback. So vote for me and vote for change today. Thank you.
Lovely, perfect, thank you. Right, so now we can move on to the questions. So the first question today we have is from Dorinda Cooper and is as follows. For us to win in elections in the future, we need to own the narrative in the media. How do you propose we do this, and why might you be able to cut through in the current populist culture? Each candidate has 2 minutes, so we start with Leila.
Well, thank you, Dorinda. And this is a really important question for our party, because we know that we get squeezed out, particularly in the mainstream media. And there are other ways, first of all, that we need to make sure that we are well ahead of the game. Social media plays an increasingly important part in the way that people communicate. And I would like to see us get more sophisticated in the use of this. And I have some really important ideas, but actually I have a lot of faith in some of the people who are now in HQ to be able to move us forward in that direction too. But to the mainstream media, I mentioned earlier, I do get that cut through. And the reason why people are interested is because actually what I do is I carve out a different space to Boris Johnson and Keir Starmer. We can't fight on their turf. We have to create a message that is distinctively liberal in its approach. And that's what I try and do. And you have to work with everybody. You have to make sure that you are engaging the media in your campaigns and you use it to get stuff done. I delivered a coronavirus compensation scheme. It was the first thing I did once we went into lockdown. I heard from a local constituent, an NHS frontline worker, whose daughter was young. His wife also worked in the NHS, and he was worried what would happen to her if we both passed away on the front line. And I used the media, along with nearly 100 MPs from across the House, to write to Boris Johnson. It then got on the front page of the Daily Express newspaper, the Brexit-loving Daily Express newspaper that only tends to make fun of Lib Dems, took up this campaign, credited me and the Lib Dems with it, and we got it done. And within 5 weeks of starting the campaign, the government then announced the life assurance scheme. And so that gentleman, who I then got back in touch with, who said, "Thank you so much for what you've done. It makes a real difference to people's lives." The media doesn't always have to be something that we are scared of. The media is a partner in getting things done. And when we get things done for people, that's when we show them how we are relevant again as a party.
And over to you, Ed.
Well, I bring 20 years of experience of dealing with the media. I've been up against every difficult news griller, from Andrew Neil to Kathy Newman to John Humphreys, all of them. And I've managed to get over our message, particularly on those key moments where everyone's watching, during general election campaigns. And I've also, from that experience, know that you've got to have message discipline. There's no point getting media for media's sake. Lots of people have got good media in the past and failed, frankly. The key thing is when you get onto the media, is using that message discipline to get over the Liberal Democrat narrative. Not to flit about, but to get over that narrative, and particularly on relevant issues. You know, for too long, our party's been speaking to itself. You've got to speak to the people on the issues. That's why I'm talking about jobs. It's why I'm talking about education and housing and care. And if you can be relevant, so take care, 10 million carers, if we can make ourselves relevant to those people with messages consistently in the media that they use, yes, we can really use that media. But you've got to have discipline, and you've got to have experience to deal with the difficult, challenging interviews that will come along. And I'm really relishing that prospect. And during my time as acting leader, the biggest breakthrough we've had is when I managed to lead the debate for a independent public inquiry, and I trapped Boris Johnson at Prime Minister's questions. And thanks to that, we led the BBC News online. We were on the 6 o'clock, the 10 o'clock, on the TV, where most people get their media from. And I really want to build on that.
Brilliant. Thank you. Right, so we'll go on to our second question. And this question comes from John Munro, and Ed, you'll be starting with this. What is your unique selling point, and which demographic of voters do you think this most appeals to, and why? Ed?
Well, I think in this context, it's probably my experience of life, experience of politics, and that links into the key areas I'm talking about, whether it's the environment, where I bring my economics training. I've got a degree in postgraduate in economics, as well as having been Cabinet Minister for Energy and Climate Change, and nearly quadrupled Britain's renewable power and negotiated the EU and the UN. That huge experience on that green agenda, I think, is definitely a USP, but my experience also in caring, both my own life as a young carer, caring for my grandmother, actually now caring for my son, I think that connects me to people. So that experience of life of politics is probably my USP. And I think it can appeal to lots of demographics. Young people are very keen on the climate, as are frankly all age groups. And caring, whether it's young carers, whether it's people caring for their spouse with dementia, whether it's people caring for their children who've got special needs, that really resonates to huge numbers of people who I don't think we've spoken to before. So I think that experience on the green agenda, on the caring agenda, will enable us to, if I'm leader, to appeal across the demographics.
Okay, thank you for that, Ed. Layla?
Politics is as much about the art of connecting with people's hearts as it is with their minds. And I think this is an area that liberals across political spectrums in many countries actually haven't caught up with yet. What we fundamentally need to do, if you look back over the last 10 years, what were the two big events? Well, of course, coalition was one part of it, and we lost a lot of trust, particularly with centre-left voters in that time, but also Brexit meant, and those of you who campaign in Brexit-facing constituencies know this more than ever, it felt again that we were not on the side of them, and they didn't trust us. They didn't trust us with those big issues, and trust is what it comes down to. But to win back people's trust, you have to start by listening, and there is no one person that can do it together. And what I bring to this, my USP, is my leadership style. As a teacher, I was a maths and physics teacher for well over 10 years before going into politics, and what I sought to do was to bring out the best in every child that was in my class, across the whole of the school and across several schools that I would have been involved in. And that's what I want to do for the party. I want to bring out the best in every single campaigner, every single activist, and to put across a message that really resonates with people on the ground, clearly, concisely, but in a way that's really authentic, that makes them realize that we are a party on their side. We need a clean break from that decline that we've seen over the last 10 years, to say to people, you know, we know we've got it wrong, and let's start again. Take another look at us. And that is how we need to start. And then we need a bold liberal message about them, their communities, about giving every person in this country a chance to thrive, the security to live life as they choose. That strong liberal message that has been absent from our political discourse for too long. And that, to me, is a winning combination.
Thank you for those responses. Next up, we have Hannah Perkins, who's asked, as leader, what would you do to encourage more people from low-income backgrounds to run for office? And what do you think are the barriers to women standing for office? And how would you address them? We'll start with Layla, please.
Thank you. Hannah, I've been really concerned about this for some time. And whilst it's really important that we talk about diversity and we talk about racial diversity and we talk about LGBTQ issues and all the rest of it, we don't forget the socioeconomic barriers, and that actually, as a party, we are far too middle class. And not that there's anything wrong with anyone that has several degrees. I have 3. But it's not about that. It's about making sure that when you are making decisions, when you are trying to work out how to solve society's problems, if you don't have the diversity, the full beauty of diversity of our communities in the room, then you are going to miss people out. But it's expensive to stand. It's expensive to stand for council. It's expensive to stand for parliament. And when I was co-chair of the Parliamentary Candidates Association, I ran a survey across all PPCs at the time that looked into what were the barriers. And the average cost of standing for Parliament, even in seats that we stood no chance to win, was in the order of between £500 and £1,000, which a lot of people just don't have. And then we even had stories of people having to remortgage their houses and then not being successful. We need funds to be able to support low-income candidates from standing. And as to women, well, I've had a lot of experience of this myself in the party. I have to say, I really didn't experience misogyny in the way that I have when I was a teacher, as I have as a parliamentary candidate and then as an MP. It is rife in political discourse. It's there in all parties, and we need to challenge it. We need to make sure that no woman ever feels that she is in any way at a disadvantage because of her sex, because ultimately that is just not liberal. But far too often in our party, we fail at this. And strides have been made. And I'm delighted to be part of things like Future Women MPs Weekend. I've mentored women. I've tried to, draw others up with me as I've gone, because that is how I got here, was the support of other women in the party. But culturally, we need to change too. That needs to be a safe place.
Those are 2 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Claire, thank you for the question. I think the low-income background issue is critical. I think too many people in too many areas of the country see us as a middle-class party, and dare I say, in the southeast region, Hustings, too southern. And we absolutely have to address that aspect of diversity. And I want to work with those local parties in areas where, frankly, the communities are less well off, where the wages are lower, and we can make sure we are recruiting members in those communities that traditionally, and certainly in recent times, we've not been in. When it comes to the need to help more women become councillors, council leaders and candidates and MPs, it is critical. My wife, Emily, stood for Parliament 4 times and unfortunately never won. And she can tell me stories, has told me stories of the sexism that she's faced, and also the many other barriers that she faced. And talking to some of the majority now of women MPs in our party, which is fantastic, by the way, you can get to feel the challenges they've been through. I've actually been working with Daisy Cooper, our amazing new MP for St Albans. I'm delighted she's backing me in this campaign. Daisy has thought long and hard about this, and she has a very detailed proposal for a fund for candidates, sort of like a bursary. It would only be able to go to those in target seats, of course, and we still need to raise the money. But it's a really well thought through proposal from Daisy, and it's exactly the sort of thing I want to get behind as the leader, to make sure that candidates in our target seats, and particularly candidates from diverse backgrounds, be they women, be they black and ethnic minority, be they people from low-income backgrounds, because we've got to make sure that we look and feel like modern Britain, that we can speak and reflect all communities. That would be my target, my aim, and I'd want to do that by putting the party's money where its mouth is.
Thank you for that. Next on the questions, we have Ian Methrall, who's asked, is there a flagship policy that you believe will restore our electoral position to pre-2015 levels? We're going to start this one with Ed.
Well, when it comes to developing a policy that's you call a flagship one before an election, you have to wait a little bit before election, see how a parliament goes to know exactly where you're going to be able to get something that's distinctive. I helped develop the policy of a penny on income tax for education when I was the party's economics advisor. That was our flagship policy in the 92 election, the 97 election, and 2001 election. And I think it fed into Tim adopting and pushing the party to adopt the penny on income tax for health and social care. So those sorts of policies can cut through, but they need the force of the party behind them. I want to pick flagship policies that last for more than one election. You know, I remember the 2005 election, which we basically fought as a party against the Iraq war, and the 2019 election, where we basically fought the election as a party against Brexit. And the danger of doing that, important though those two issues were, crucial though those two issues were, we didn't at election time, when people are watching us, tell anything else about our party, about what we stand for. And then after the election, people are going, well, what do they stand for? And so you've got to develop flagship policies in the context of that longer term branding and understanding the party. You've got to develop a flagship policy that is distinctive, that the other parties can't say, and a policy that is popular as well and that speaks to our values. So I'm not, as leader, particularly given policy is determined by the members, let's face it, we're a democratic party. I'm not going to say what the flagship policy is now in August 2020, when the election may not be till May 2024. But I've set a sense of my direction, my priorities, the green economy, the fairer society, and the more caring country. And I would hope we'd have one or more flagship policies in those areas.
Thank you very much. Layla.
Thank you, Ian. Well, I've thought deeply about this and what it is in the context of this leadership election that we need to do. And if you look at some of the research around what gets people going, what connects people to a policy, we have to start by recognizing that most people out there don't really think like us. When they look at a political party, they are far more likely to vote for that party based on two main criteria. One, if they trust them, and two, if they find them credible. And credible is interesting because that's partly based on if they are, you know, contenders in that seat or not, but also what they can deliver for them. But we also have a third issue, which is that when I was door knocking around the country, and after the last election, I was, you know, just in despair. I went to places like Leeds and Sheffield, I went to Wales, I went to Kent, I went to Devon and Cornwall, and I was speaking to voters who didn't vote Lib Dem at the last election, asking them, what would make you vote Lib Dem again? And that is how I came up with education, the environment, and the economy. And education is top, because the other thing they said is that we just don't know what you stand for. And they all said that they valued public services. They said that they felt actually Labour had kind of colonised the NHS, and that's a shame, and we shouldn't stop talking about that. It's incredibly important, especially now. But actually, when we had cut through, it was with education, because what better way of describing how we want to invest in the individual, how we want every single person in the country to thrive, than by talking about that. And that is what I did as a teacher. It's what I want to do as leader. It's why I'm in politics in the first place. And what voters were telling me is that that would get them to listen again. But we have to keep listening. We have to keep starting with the voters. And if that's not working, I'm not adverse to ditching it. But we absolutely have to do that. And then recognize, of course, that it's the party itself that makes the policy. And I love this party for that, because it means that it's evidence-based and that if we were ever in a position to implement it, it would work.
Thank you. We must move on. Thank you very much for your answers. Moving swiftly on to the next question, Gareth has submitted the following. Many of the issues we face, from global warming, pandemic disease, antibiotic resistance, require population-level solutions. How do we, as a Liberal Party that champions individual freedoms, rise to these challenges? If we start with Layla on this one, please.
Thank you, Gareth. Well, this is what I think is truly unique about the Lib Dem position, is that yes, they need population level solutions, and these are huge issues. But the way that you deliver those solutions isn't centralized. It doesn't say, as Labour do, as the Tories do, that it's the state that will deliver all solutions. That centralized government, big government state that is going to then dictate in its various ways how these things are going to get solved. Now, I think a really good example, just let's take one example, is coronavirus, where we have seen countries that take the liberal approach, that bottom-up approach, that more localized approach at these big, not just population level, but world level issues. They do better. And the reason why they do better, I'm thinking of places like Germany in particular, is because those decision makers are more nimble. They understand how systems are going to integrate with communities. They understand the behavior of their local populations. And those individuals trust them more. And what we're seeing, and I'm chairing the all-party group on coronavirus in the House, we're taking evidence all the way through recess, we're meeting every week. And one of the things that we've heard that really troubles me is that the test, trace, isolate system is not working because it's too centralized. And people don't trust it because it was outsourced to a private company and they don't know what's going to happen to their data. Every single person I've spoken to, from the NHS Confederation to the British Medical Association, is saying, let's make it more local. Let's use that trust that people have in their own communities to then knit all of this together and come up with a solution that is going to affect at the population level. And by the way, that includes business. The liberal approach always includes business in that equation, unlike Labour, who are inherently skeptical of business's ability to be able to do this. When you engage with business well, and the whole of society well, that's when you get those population level solutions.
You're at the 2 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ed, your turn.
Gareth, all the difficult challenges that you mentioned are going to require global responses. And it's how our country works, not just with our own population, but with other governments. I mean, take climate change. We could have the best policies and get down to net zero, but we're only 2% of global greenhouse gas emissions. So you have to have international solutions. And if you're going to not just persuade your own people, but also other governments, the only way you're going to do that is by being evidence-based, getting the science right, and showing that there are technological solutions that mean we can still develop as a world, as people, still improve our living standards while tackling these challenges, be they climate change, be they the pandemic. And I think you can do that. I mean, take renewable energy. One of the reasons I'm so excited about it is that not only are we now a world leader in things like offshore wind, and clearly can do a lot more and get coal completely off our system and gas eventually off our system and go green in terms of electricity. But renewable power is going to change the whole world. If you're in rural Africa, rural Latin America, rural India, you're one of the 1 billion poorest, we want you to be able to develop. But previous generation, they said, well, if you go green, it's going to be very expensive. Now, green is the cheapest way, the safest way, and the easiest way for the 1 billion poorest in our world, not just to go green, but to develop micro solar grids. Not big power lines from the city, from coal plants miles and miles away, but micro solar grids, micro wind grids, so we can empower people in a really genuine way and transform their lives. So, I think technology and science and evidence-based policies are the way to tackle these issues and actually empower individuals so they can actually have more freedom in a world that is cleaner and safer.
Thank you for both your remarks. Next, we're going to turn to the general election actually, with Mike asking about the Thornhill report. And his question was that the report identifies 3 key roles at the top of the party: the CEO, the president, and the leader. If you become leader, you will be in one of those 3 roles, needing to work with the others. Can you tell us about the nearest parallel situation you've been in, how you approached it, and what the outcome was? We start this one with Ed.
Well, first of all, I think the general election review is absolutely critical to the future of our party. I'm proud that I proposed Dorothy Thornhill to chair it. I co-commissioned it. I sort of really tried to improve the remit of the general election review, so it didn't just look at 2019, but could look more widely, because I think our problems would be going more widely. And it really is a very detailed document, 61 pages, many recommendations, no quick fixes. We've got to build solid foundations if we're going to get out of the mess that we're currently in. And it says, just as Mike said, that at the top, you've got this the three-legged chair. How's that going to work? Well, obviously, I've had a little bit of experience as acting interim temporary leader. It's not always been easy because you're not the full leader with legitimacy. However, I've been working with Mark Pack, the president, and with Mike, the new CEO, and already began to feel that it's very possible to get that division right. The leader has to challenge and focus on the message, both communicating the message and honing that message and going out and winning those votes on the TV, in working with local parties. The chief executive's job is to manage the party. And I think the president's job it has been the one where there's been confusion in recent years. And I think that does need to focus on outward looking at the membership rather than trying to sort of question the CEO's role. So, you know, I think I've got some experience doing that. I have had experience in other jobs, but I'm running out of time. So, you know, general election, you fantastic. If I need it's a mandate for a real change so we can get back to proper campaigning where the national party isn't sending out leaflets in local parties in local areas that undermine the local campaigns. That dissonance between the local and national campaigns is something that's infuriated me, and the general election review confirms that we need to change that.
Thank you. Layla.
Thank you. Well, what lies at the heart of the three-legged stool model is something that I have done throughout my entire career, most of which, of course, was outside of Westminster, and I do have broad experience in that realm that I think does bring something else to my ability to have a perspective that is not so internally focused. And I think that's really critical right now, because what we need to do is to change how we do things. Thornhill review itself, I think, is fantastic. I'm delighted that throughout the course of this leadership election, no matter who wins, it will get its mandate. And it's very important to do that because it's going to be difficult to implement. But when I read about the three-legged stool, the three-legged chair, it reminded me actually of when I was a teacher. I was the youngest ever head of year in my first school that I was part of. And we used to talk about teaching and the student actually being a three-legged stool of the teacher, the student, and the parents. And by encouraging collaborative working through a common aim that we've all agreed on, by understanding the different roles that we played, there are countless stories that I could tell you, from a child who, you know, was really struggling, and together we worked out actually had some quite difficult special needs that had been undiagnosed, to actually being part of a senior leadership team at a social enterprise that I worked in just before being elected, where actually there were 4 of us in that case, but we would collectively take decisions that would then be put in front of shareholders and that would manage thousands of students and hundreds of teachers, and that was my specific job within it. The point that is made in the review is that that division of labour is not clear enough. It will partly be driven by personalities, and it will partly be driven by having a really honest conversation about strengths and weaknesses. And this is one of the strengths that I know I bring in my own leadership style. I know my strengths, I know my weaknesses. I'm really looking forward to this role and hashing out what that three-legged stool looks like, because without it, it's unstable and it will fall over.
Yes, thank you. We've got an interesting question next from Sashi on membership. Well, local party members. We don't seem to focus much on membership recruitment outside of general elections. How can we change that? And if we go with Layla to start with her.
Well, thank you, Sashi. You'll see the smile on my face, because often people ask, you know, what did Oxwab do? You know, what was it that allowed you to overturn a 10,000 Tory majority in 2017 when there weren't very many seats like that, and then increase it again to nearly 8,000, the best ever result in this seat's history for any candidate and any party? And where it all began was an understanding from us. We had a very big strategic document that took us all the way through. It was actually 5-10 years it went out to. And it was bought in by everyone in the party. But top of the list of things we needed to do was to recruit members and activate members. It is a crying shame how little we as a party spend on training our own activists. If we were a business, we would not be spending this little resource in training local party executives, in making sure that everyone's got the tools that they need. This will be one of the top priorities for me as leader, because I've seen it for myself and the impact it has on the ground. Because if you recruit members, but then also make sure that you're engaging your membership, and there is a lot of best practice around this. This is not about reinventing any wheels. There are a lot of people that can help local parties who want to do this. And by the way, we were doing this and increasing our membership quarter by quarter during coalition. It is absolutely possible to do this, even in the worst of circumstances. And what it led to was a campaigning force that was enormous. And that is partly what led to the success that we had in 2017. So I completely agree with the premise of your question. Membership recruitment needs to be an all year round affair. And the effect of that is how we are going to build at all levels of the party, whether you're a council seat that, a place that doesn't have its first council seat, or you're looking to take the council, or you're looking to take your Westminster seat, whichever part of the trajectory you're on, membership recruitment and activation is top of the list of things that need to happen.
Thank you, Leila. And Ed?
So actually, we've just got to value members more. They're crucial to the future of this party. And it will be challenging to keep the huge number we've managed to recruit over the last few years, but that's got to be a top priority. Clearly, that will need national effort and that national recruitment campaigns we've seen. But the National Party has to work better with local parties to support them in doing what they need to do. I've been an MP for over 20 years now, and I was first a candidate back in 1995. And we weren't supposed to win. We were number 106 on the target list when we only won 47 seats. And people often ask me, how come you're the only MP in our party's history ever to win without being a target seat? And one of the things was that we recruited more members. We looked at what target seats were being asked to do, their KPIs, and one of them was to get 500 members. And we went out and got 500 members, even though some target seats didn't. And that gave us both activity in getting those members, but also it gave us, frankly, more money. It gave us more activists, and it became a virtuous circle. So I think we've got to get over to local parties, the importance of going out and actively recruiting. But I'd say this, and this is really, really important, I think, we've got to make efforts in communities where we're underrepresented. We had an earlier question about not having many members in some low-income backgrounds. We've got to sort that. We've got to sort it in Black communities, in Asian communities. My constituency is pretty diverse. We've got a big Gujarati, big Tamil, big Muslim, a big Korean populations. And over the years, we've managed to get quite a number of those communities to join the Liberal Democrats. And now many of them actually are councillors. And it takes a lot of effort, but that's what you've got to do if we're going to make sure our membership is strong, but also reflects our society. And if we do that, I think we will be able to then do the follow-up, the training that's necessary to activate people and also involve more people, more members more often.
Thank you very much. Very important question from Sashi. Next, we're going to move on to the environment with George Potter, who asks, how can we square our climate change agenda with our coalition record of support for shale gas and massive taxpayer subsidy of nuclear power? This one we start with Ed.
Well, very easily, because actually what happened in the coalition was we more than trebled, nearly quadrupled Britain's renewable power, became the world leader in offshore wind. Coal has come off the bars thanks to us, a massive record. And if you look at what happened in fracking and nuclear, is what the Tories were desperately trying to get us to do, is they haven't gone very far. I am very proud to have passed the regulation that has basically stopped fracking in this country. What was happening is when they were fracking in Lancashire, you were seeing earth tremors, sort of minor earthquakes. And so Chris Huhne stopped that early fracking, which the Tories were so keen on, pending a review. and the review came to me to implement, and I put in place a traffic light system where if there was a tremor above 0.5 on the Richter scale, they had to stop fracking. And that single regulation that I introduced has effectively killed the fracking industry in our country. So, George, not a problem for us. And we're on nuclear power. What we did, which I think is going to have long-standing implications, is we first of all got down the price of renewables. So when I took over, offshore wind was £160 per unit of electricity, and nuclear was just about 90 to 100, so a lot cheaper. Now, nuclear power prices haven't come down much, but offshore wind's gone down from 160 to under 40. Massive changes. So the economics that we put through have gone against nuclear. Moreover, on nuclear, what we did was we exposed the true cost of nuclear, the cost of decommissioning, the cost of nuclear waste management, the cost of risk, and we pushed that into the price. And yes, it was expensive because nuclear power is expensive. And basically, we have undermined the economics of nuclear by making it transparent. I'm really proud that not only did I massively increase renewables, but I passed the regulation that stopped fracking, and I basically used transparency to expose the cost of nuclear.
Thank you for the answer. And Leila.
Well, thank you, George, for your question. And I think where we need to start actually is recognizing that a lot of people don't know that we are anti-fracking because we haven't made it clear enough. And whilst we've got local parties that are individually fighting against it, I actually do think that we need to be much more front foot on this. And yeah, there are inconsistent messages that other people very often throw at the party based on what happened in the past. But actually what we need to do now is to draw that line and make it very clear that we don't believe that new nuclear is the answer at all. We don't believe that fracking is the answer. And actually that we are going to be the most bold party when it comes to the climate crisis, because ultimately that is what we are going to need to do to grab hold of this agenda and to also win back young voters again. When I was at university, it was frankly cool to vote Lib Dem. We were on the progressive side of every issue. We were future focused. We absolutely understood where the world was going and what we needed to do to solve the big issues before they landed. And now we're in a state where we've got 10 years left to tackle the climate emergency, not to mention, of course, the nature emergency as it's related to biodiversity. And we're going through a mass extinction right now, and we don't talk about this enough. And when I was surrounded by 2,000 young people in Oxford, the very first Fridays for Future strikes, I said to them, I am going to go back to Parliament and deliver for you. And I called the first debate on the floor of the House in 2.5 years on climate change. I then worked cross-party with Caroline Lucas and Ed Miliband to bring Greta Thunberg to Parliament to address MPs, to raise this issue so that it became a big national issue. And the fact that people weren't there in that debate, only 50 people came, made pages and pages in newspapers, and people were like, where are you? This is the biggest issue of our time. We need to capture this agenda and show people that we get it and that we are the party that if they care about green issues, they can come and support, because we are going to do everything that we can to fix it.
Thank you. We had a couple of questions next that are very similar, so I've kind of grouped them together, which was, what is the relevance of the Lib Dems in the first past the post system, and what is your approach to changing the voting system, and how will you approach potential pacts or non-aggression pacts in the next general election?
That's a lot. That's a lot.
Yeah, it's all general election related.
Yes.
So we'll start that one with Leila.
Right, in 2 minutes. Okay, so first of all, I hope it's obvious, electoral reform is a must. The first past the post system absolutely depresses our vote. We know this. In seats, however, where we are conservative facing, where we are very, very strong against the Conservatives, that we didn't quite make it over the line at the last election, we need to focus on them in 2024. We also need one eye, incidentally, on Labour facing seats that we might want to be looking at in 2029. What we need is a strategy that can encompass both. I don't want to be leader for just a few years. I want us to look to the 10-year mark at the very least. And that starts by making sure that people know what liberalism is, to carve out that distinct space. But in those seats that are Tory facing, it does not make sense for the centre left progressive parties to fight each other. And what we did in Oxford, West and Abingdon, I think is the model. I don't think the top-down approach that we had at the last election works. What we did is we got the Greens to stand aside, as some of you did also in the Southeast. And they started campaigning with us. And through informal groups like the Progressive Alliance, actually Labour Party members came on board. And it was via a third party, but they would come out, deliver leaflets for us. They would see that because we had put forward a vision that they could believe in, predicated on public services, on saving the environment, all these things that I've been talking about, those key themes of my campaign, then that motivated them to take the fight to the Tories. And a lot of soft Tories, incidentally, agree with us on all of these issues. They don't like Boris Johnson. They don't like Dominic Raab. They don't want them in power, but they were so scared of Corbyn at the last election, they went that way. And we have to, in this election, make use of the fact that Keir Starmer is a easier Labour leader for us to work with, and that actually the best thing that we can do is to not fight each other in those seats. So it's not standing down, but it is at least not having that acrimonious relationship that we have had with them in the past. And that's what's going to lead to our success at the next election.
Thank you, Layla. Over to you, Ed.
We've got to be clear on an anti-Conservative party. I've ruled out any coalition deal, support, supplying confidence with the Tories. It's really, really important because we need to be the anti-Conservative party in the Southeast. I need across the country. Most of our 11 MPs, Tories are second place. In the 91 seats across the country where we're second, 80 are against the Tories. In the Southeast, you've got 74 Tory MPs and just 8 Labour. So if we want to make progress under first past the post, it's going to be those second places. Places like, Guildford, Southwest Surrey, Lewis, so many of them, Eastbourne, where we can win from second and we can beat the Tories. Now, the truth is, quite a lot of those areas, the Labour vote's already been squeezed. And we need to maintain that squeeze, and an understanding with Labour Party members and Labour voters in those areas is the right thing. And I think that understanding, that very informal, below the radar understanding, which we achieved so well in '97 under Paddy, I think that's going to be possible under Starmer in a way it wasn't under Corbyn. I think Layla's right on that. But the challenge in the Southeast isn't just to squeeze the Labour vote, because in lots of our seats where we're second, we won't win with just more Labour votes. We've got to take moderate Conservative votes. And I believe I'm the leader with my business background, my economics background, to appeal to those moderate Tories, using my experience of 20 years in Parliament, 30 years in the party, fighting the Tories, to be able to persuade them to come over, just like I've done in Kingston-on-Serpent. Kingston-on-Serpent was a Tory stronghold. The notional majority when I won by 56 votes in '97 was over 15,000. I turned a 15,000 notional majority in '97 to a 15,000 Liberal Democrat majority in 2001. So I know how to persuade Tory voters. And I think, therefore, in the election strategy and first past the post across the Southeast, in most of the seats we can win, yes, it's about squeezing that Labour vote with an understanding with Labour, but it's also about appealing to those moderate Tories.
Thank you. Next, we go on to a really important question as well, very relevant to what's been going on recently. I'm delighted to say this person has now joined us as a diversity officer in one of our local parties in the Southeast. Bindi Shah asks, what will you do to ensure we increase BAME representation in our politics, given the unconscious bias which is so apparent in our institutions? And we'll start there with Ed.
Bindi, thank you for that. I mean, the party's been looking at this for years and failed and failed and failed. The Alderdice review in 2018 makes it very clear that we've got to go at a very deep level, at a cultural level, with local parties getting on board and really making sure that, whether it's through unconscious bias training or through many other things, that they are really reaching out to the communities in their area and making sure the local party is representative. And it's that reach out which is critical. I represent the most diverse constituency of any Liberal Democrat MP at the moment now, since we've lost Simon Hughes. So I have a large Tamil population from Sri Lanka, a large Gujarati population from northwest India. We have Muslims many from Pakistan and Bangladesh, but also from Iraq, Iran, Syria now. We have quite a large Sikh population, mainly from East Africa, but also from Afghanistan. And we have the largest Korean population in the country. So it's pretty diverse. We've got a number of other groups as well. And what I've done over 20 years is gone and reached out, and I've gone to them. I've gone to their places of worship. I've gone to their places of fun, gone to their parties, and, persuaded some. I've built up trust, first of all, built that relationship. Then, because I've worked hard for them and I've taken the trouble to go and meet them and talk to them, they've joined the party. So we have one of the most representative parties in the whole country in terms of representing our population. 8 of our 38 councillors are from Black or Asian or minority ethnic backgrounds. So we brought a lot of people on and not given them, that they've earned elected place, and we've encouraged that. And what I say to the party, what I will do as a leader, and this will be an absolute top priority for me to make sure we do look like modern Britain, is we need to reach out in the way we've done here. And I'll just end on this. We need particularly to reach out to the Black community. We've done okay in Asian and minority ethnic groups, not good enough, but okay. Yes, but we failed with the Black community. We've got to go to their churches. We've got to go to their places where they congregate and work, and we've got to be with them, and then we can turn this round.
Thank you very much. Over to you, Leila.
Well, thank you, Bindi, for your question. And under my leadership, I will absolutely make this a priority, because actually at its root, it speaks to who we are as liberals. And it actually undermines our ability to then be able to affect this at a national level. When I've spoken out about the lack of diversity on FTSE 350 company boards, I did a story about this in The Guardian, and in the comments underneath on the Twitter feed were people saying, well, who are you to talk? The Liberal Democrats are not representative enough. And it undermines that message. And as liberals, what we believe is that no one should be held back by things they did not choose, which includes, of course, their gender, their sexuality, but also, of course, their race. And I'm half Palestinian, and I've faced some of that discrimination myself. And it often comes in the guise of, well, you're not really that local, are you? And I've had friends who are Black who've told me that they've gone for selection in seats, and the primary reason that people gave for not wanting to vote for them was that, well, this area is just not really ready for a Black person. Based on what? Look at the Tories. They have some of the most incredible MPs, to be perfectly honest. They are great people. They are Tories, and I don't agree with them on everything, but they are representing some of the whitest parts of the country. We absolutely have to do this. We have to now put our money where our mouth is. We have to introduce a Rooney rule that includes a percentage of people on shortlists for seats to make sure that in those target seats they are included. And actually we need to campaign to change the Equality Act so we can have all ethnic minority shortlists. We need to support those candidates in coming forward. And yes, it means going out into your own communities, because if we don't have a membership that itself is representative of the communities that we wish to serve, then that's the pipeline. And the reason to do it is because look at the extraordinary people that we don't have in our party, because fundamentally we have not changed that culture. And the bit of the Older Dice review that is the hardest bit to implement, but must be a priority now, is we need to change the culture of our party from top to bottom. None of this, oh, you don't really look like you're from here stuff. We absolutely have to challenge ourselves. It's a shameful thing that we haven't got here yet. And it's one of the things that I think we need to make a priority in the next few years.
Thank you very much. Next question that we have comes from Mark, and he says, the public dislike politicians. How will you have the confidence to be a different type of politician and break the stereotype, admitting when you are wrong or don't have an answer? And I think we start with Leila here.
Thank you, Mark. So as I've mentioned, I spent whatever it was, 13 years or so of my career outside of Parliament. And I actually didn't really get that interested in politics until I was in my late 20s. And even then, one of the things that used to really frustrate me was, you know, you'd look at the news and sort of identikit politicians that look the same, that give the same answer. You know what they're going to say. They, you know, skirt around the question. And when I got elected, I decided that I wanted to do things differently. The way I was using social media was actually to be really honest about the challenges that I was facing. When I've had questions that are difficult questions, or about my personal life, or indeed about a bit of policy that I don't know something about, which is very common, I'm upfront about what I know, what I don't know, and I find a way to do it authentically. And I think that's what people want now, is politicians that can cut through in that way, that they feel that they are connected with, that they aren't somewhere up high, that actually they are people that they could, frankly, you know, have a coffee with, have a connection to. And that is what I bring to this leadership contest. That is what I do best. It comes, I think, potentially from the years of experience I had working as a teacher. It's also just part of my personality. But it also comes because I'm a scientist. And I did physics at Imperial College. It was the whole of my life before. And I believe that if you don't know the answer, there is no shame in saying that I don't know yet. I'm going to go away and find out. I'm going to really listen and respect your question enough to not give you a bunch of drivel, but instead to be really honest. And by building that honesty, by being authentic in that way, that is how you build trust. And trust fundamentally is what we now need to achieve as a party with the electorate as a whole.
Thank you very much. Over to you, Ed.
Mark, a really important question. If you look at where our party's done well over the years under different leaders, I think it's been where the leader has been able to show that they are different, and they're different in terms of how they approach power. So for me, I'm always going back to Paddy Ashdown, but I could also talk about Nick actually in this, where they were really clear they wanted to reform the political system, and they weren't part of it, and they managed themselves, particularly Paddy, to be more anti-establishment. And that's really one of the reasons I joined the party under Paddy, because he had that sort of liberal grit that he wasn't going to take the rubbish of the current lot of political leaders. And I think that's an important tone we need to get. But beyond that, it's how you then reach out to other people. So last night, for example, I was doing a youth online Zoom with a group which is about promoting democracy in young people called My Life, My Say. And it was hosted by a DJ called Swazi. And I had a question from a girl who was deaf called Molly about, she works in retail, and she was saying how it's quite difficult if you're deaf when you're trying to lip read when people are have got face masks. And what was my solution to that? And I had to confess to Molly and all the young people on My Life, My Say, I didn't know the answer. And I admitted that. And the reaction from Molly and from Swazi was so positive, because they said, well, you've had the honesty to say you didn't know. We don't often hear that. So I do think, actually, by being willing to admit when you don't know, rather than pretending, actually you can get some real brownie points in that. And the only thing others I'd say is that I have quite a lot of experience of life. You know, when you lose both your parents before you leave school, has a big impact on you. I think you develop a degree of empathy with people. I'm particularly empathetic to young carers, to people who have had bereavements. And I think if you have that empathy, which is natural, authentic, you can reach out to people, and it's very different from a Boris Johnson.
Thank you. We're going over to a subject that I know will be of interest to quite a few members watching, which is the subject of the European Union. Andrew has asked, leaving the European Union will be a disaster for the UK. What is the party and your leadership going to do about giving the people of this country the facts about our economic future outside of the EU? And we start on this one with Ed.
Well, I think this is the biggest strategic disaster for our country beyond COVID, but something that's been actually put on ourselves. I mean, it's disaster on the economy, it's disaster on things like climate change, on things like security, and you know, we are going to have to show that this is causing real problems and will cause a lot of problems. We've got to be sensitive how we do that. I think if we did it in a sort of told you so type of voice, I think that would, you know, undermine our ability to persuade people. Because what I'd like us to do as the pro-European party, and I'm passionate about our membership of the European project, I want us to show to people what we're missing, and do that gently, and make the case for cooperation, whether it's on pandemics, or on climate change, or on trade, and gradually show the hypocrisy and inconsistencies and frankly the lies of the Brexiteers. But how we do that and the tone we adopt is going to be really, really important. You know, we lost a lot of support by going to the revoke position, support that we were just holding on to with the second referendum. And I think we have to learn from that. And I think we should keep a very open mind about the timings of when we may decide that the British people's opinions have changed on Britain's membership of the European Union. There are some positive polling, but I think it's too early. But if public opinion really does change in a very dramatic way, then I think we should be the ones leading that, because we are the pro-European party. But we should help that in the first place by making the arguments for cooperation and showing as an internationalist party that we are losing ground because we're not there at the table at the heart of the cooperation in Europe.
Great. Layla. Oh, I think you're muted, Layla. Start again there.
I'm muted because it was my cat that was meowing. I'm really sorry if people can hear. I've left the door and the windows open to get a breeze through the house because she's very old and she's very hot. So I do apologise. So first of all, I'm gutted about where we are in terms of the EU. My father went to go work for the European Commission when I was 1. We moved to Belgium. I went to the European school. The first flag I ever drew was an EU flag. Is it any wonder I ended up as a Lib Dem? But where we are now is what we have to accept. And we also have to accept that there are parts of the country, including some of our top target seats like Eastbourne, where people felt that they could not vote for us on this issue. So we have to be very, very careful about how we go about doing this. It cannot be, I told you so. It actually has to be more about, well, was this what you voted for? More listening, more of a question. And in the Southeast, this really affects the Southeast in so many different ways. I mean, just take, you know, we've got 10,000 lorries per day that pass through Kent. If you have a couple of minutes of delay, that's miles of tailbacks. Operation Stack and Brock showed us that it would bring that local economy to an absolute standstill, let alone the companies that help to drive the economy in the Southeast, tech and digital and service companies. These companies rely on us being able to have easy access to EU markets, and also local economies rely on being able to get around already congested roads. We have to meet people where they are at with this, whether they voted leave or remain. The most tragic thing of all is the government going off the cliff edge of no deal. And I'm deeply concerned by this. We have to continue to tell people in advance how important it is that we don't do that. It's why it's important to talk about it, to raise it, but not in a way that's going to get their backs up. It's not Brexit at any cost. And the way we frame it is we say, we are on your side. Do you want to be able to trade with our biggest trading partner? Do you want to maintain animal welfare standards, environmental standards, standards that we help to create? Then actually we're on the same side, whether you voted leave or remain. And that's how we bring round public opinion.
2 minutes there.
Thank you.
Next up, we have a question from Rebecca, and she asks you both. At the last general election, one of the key challenges for Jo Swinson was her voting record under the coalition government, particularly her support for austerity measures. How can the Lib Dems rebuild trust in the electorate and move on from the coalition with you as leader? Layla.
Well, I'll start by saying it was painful to watch, because I honestly thought that the issue had gone away. I thought that, you know, 5 years on, people wouldn't remember. And what we saw in that election was half the questions at the question time event. It was the Andrew Neil interview. And the problem was, and the problem is in politics generally, is that when people see you saying one thing, but then you go and doing or having done something else, that's a disconnect. They don't, it just feels like they can't trust you. And so what I offer in this leadership election is a chance to not rewrite the past, it happened, but actually to draw a line and to say that we are moving forward. We've understood those mistakes. I don't want to own things like the bedroom tax. The bedroom tax was one of the most cruel policies ever enacted by a government. The austerity measures meant the decimation of local government. It meant the loss of children's services, youth services, all of that wraparound care, the most vulnerable people in our society that we care the most about. And we are saying now, we don't want to return to austerity, and absolutely we should not. But how is that not immediately undermined by what happened before? We have to show people that it happened, we've learned from those mistakes, we are understanding where we went wrong, and it will not happen again. And to build back that trust is going to take time. But it means starting with listening to what people really care about now, being very clear about our support for the poorest in society, strong public services, and that even at this time of very difficult economic downturn, that we are not going to do the same thing again. And by having a leader that can have that forward-facing focus, that future-facing focus, then that's how we can communicate that credibly.
Thank you. And Ed?
I think Jo's mistake was the way she answered the question. She could have talked about all the positive things that we achieved, and she could have pivoted away from that. If I'd been asked those questions, I'd have talked about my record. The fact that I nearly quadrupled Britain's renewable power. I fought the Tories. They didn't want me to do it. I fought them and I beat them. And not only did I do that, but we became the world leader in offshore wind. So I would have a very good story to tell. And in many ways, that would be the greatest strength for us, because we could actually pivot from the success that we've achieved, the credibility we've achieved, to our future vision at the next election, which of building a green economy, being the only party with the best track record on climate change. And, you know, if you look at what happened under Vince Cable, now, Vince Cable was our leader. He was a coalition cabinet minister for 5 years. And under his leadership, we got the best ever local election results and the best European results ever. So it does not follow that having a leader who was a coalition cabinet minister was bad. In fact, actually, the evidence suggests it can be pretty good for us. And one of the problems I've had in this debate is, you know, you can't pick a mix in politics. You just can't do that. So you can't look at all the bad things, oh, all right, dreadful, and then talk about the good things, like equal marriage, like the pupil premium, helping the most disadvantaged kids in our world, taking the poorest out of tax, the work that Norman Lamb did on mental health. You know, yes, of course the government did a few things wrong. The Tories did all the worst things. Our problem was we didn't get them the blame and get us the credit. We politically badly handled it. I won't do that. And one of the reasons I know I won't suffer in the way Jo did is because of my personal record, which I'll be able to pivot on. And I'll give Andrew Neil the grilling. He won't give me the grilling.
Perfect. That's the 2 minutes. Right, so next question comes from Alan Collins. And he says, I've heard much said about how we need to sell the party and its policies in order to win again. But a big part of winning seats lies in a partly exhausted and demoralised membership base. How will you as leader motivate the members to go out and campaign, particularly in areas like mine, where we've been out of favour for some time? And we'll start with Ed.
Well, there's no doubt we've got to get a lot of the members who are quite demoralised because of, you know, Brexit and our failure in the last 3 general elections. We've got to get them up and ready for the fight. And there are many ways you do that, by talking on strong messages. And I think the greener economy, fairer society, more caring country messages that I'm getting over does appeal to lots of members. That's what I'm certainly finding in the campaign. But moreover than that, I think we've got to show them that we can win. You know, people want to be part of a winning campaign, and winning at local elections is going to be critical to that, building up those foundations. Because when people see the local party winning, then they can get the buzz and they can get into a virtuous circle rather than the vicious circle we've been. And let's remember, we have been doing well. I get fed up with people talking down the party, actually, because last May under Vince, we did do so well. We've now got councillors in many, many seats that we didn't used to. Let's celebrate that. And let's get ready for the 2021 elections. It's going to be a big moment in our party. Let's make sure we're selecting the candidates now, give them the training now, and we're getting that campaigning going. And let's remember what the General Election Review said. The General Election Review was clear that we've got to get the national and local campaigning better integrated. And I've been talking to the Local Government Association, the Association of Liberal Democrat Councillors, with some ideas on the environment and care, social care, which are both big issues at local level, but how we can link them in to next year's 2021 elections. So motivating members, winning elections. And you know, when we start winning again, our poll rating will come up. That's what my history of 30 years in the party shows. You're only going to start improving your poll rating when you win at those local elections. So I'll put a huge emphasis in my leadership on working with local councillors, local candidates, local parties to win at those local elections, to build those secure foundations for us to then break through at Westminster.
Brilliant, thank you for that answer. And Layla?
Well, it all starts with local elections. When we were building up in Oxford, West and Abingdon, it was built off the back of winning parish council elections, council by-elections. It's so important for the party. And if you look back at the party's history, right back to Joe Grimmond, when we were rebuilding from a low base like this, you have to do it through winning at the local level. Now, in Oxfordshire, the Tories tried to pull a stunt where they wanted to try and push the elections next year off into the distance because of potential government reorganisation. Thoroughly undemocratic. I understand that there is some enthusiasm for Tories in some areas of the southeast to do this. If they do, I fought them off here and I will come and help you fight them off there. It is thoroughly undemocratic. It must be stopped. But what we have to do is also appreciate that there are parts of the country that haven't had a councillor or more than one or two councillors for a very long time. And in my plan to win for the party, it starts by having a bold liberal message, give them something to campaign for, get them excited about being a liberal again, be proud to be a Liberal Democrat, but you also have to have the support on the ground. And what we have to commit to as a party is, I was talking about this in an earlier question, training and support with local activists, membership drives, working with the regions, not imposed by HQ, but actually an HQ that understands that you as campaigners on the ground are best placed to decide where to target and what to say to those communities. That bottom-up approach that we so often talk about, but we don't live our own values in this party anywhere near enough. So that is what I want to focus on, working with ALDC, working with the LGA, working with you as activists and local parties to empower you to be able to make those gains. And whether you're a party who still hasn't got its first councillor or someone looking to take a council next year, you can know that me as leader, I will make those council elections my top priority for next year.
Thank you, Layla, as well. I'm glad that someone submitted a question on this. We've got Sean next, who is asking a very important question on mental health. So mental health issues are one of the biggest health crises facing this country. It accounts for over 50% of work absences. I live in an area that is sadly a suicide hotspot, and I would like to see a more proactive response to this growing crisis because it is likely to worsen given the current pandemic. What steps would you take and like to see implemented to address this issue? And we start here with Layla.
Well, Sean, thank you for this. It's an issue very close to my heart. I've been very open that in the past I suffered from depression and anxiety. And what got me through it was solid support, but also tailored support to what I needed at the time. And it's also something that doesn't necessarily go away with one course of treatment. It's something that people need to be able to access at all sorts of different points in their lives. Incidentally, I'm very worried about the state of our mental health services right now because coronavirus, for all sorts of different reasons, whether it be because there's the uncertainty over jobs, whether, as last week in the inquiry that I'm leading on coronavirus, we heard from bereaved families of people who'd lost loved ones due to this crisis and felt that they just didn't have the specialist support. I mean, many of them said goodbye to their loved ones over an iPad. It was devastating for them. And we just don't have the resourcing that we need in our country. Now, I am proud of what the party historically has done on this. Full credit to the work that Norman Lamb did as a public health minister. And since then, I was asked in another hustings the other day, what would be my top public health campaign that I would want the party to push? And I said, well, actually, I want us to continue to push this because it's so important. The link between mental and physical health is so better understood now in the medical profession, but is not catered for. What it fundamentally comes down to is money. The penny on the pound on income tax for NHS and social care is a popular policy, but the earmarking that we did as part of that to make mental health services no longer the Cinderella service of the NHS, and indeed for children and adolescents' mental health to not be the Cinderella service of the Cinderella service of that, is critically important. I think attitudes are changing, but I want to see our party be really open about this. I will talk about it in my own context, but also in the context of my work as a teacher. And it is the key to building resilience in our population. We have to continue to campaign on this. And I thank you for the question.
Over to you, Ed.
Sean, there's no doubt this is a massive issue in our society that's been overlooked for too long. Suicide rates were rising even before COVID. I think COVID is going to cause a mental health disaster. And whether it's the child and adolescent mental health services in local areas or the mental health service more broadly, it really has been underfunded, under-resourced, and doesn't have enough skilled people in it. We need to recruit more, and Brexit's just going to make that harder. So massive problem. For me, it's going to be a top issue. One of the reasons I'm talking about a more caring country is under caring, I'm not just talking about care for the elderly. I'm talking about care for people with mental health problems, care for people with physical problems. If the 10 million carers are looking after a wide variety of people, including a lot of people with mental health problems. So it's very much centered to my campaign. And I think the party can speak with a very strong record. Lots of local government people, lots of people in the party in the health service have got a good track record. But look at what Norman Lamb did in the coalition. One of the reasons I think we should be able to talk about the coalition and be proud about it, not just draw a line under it, is because fantastic work that we did in the coalition on mental health, things that we need to really build upon. And I think we can develop those policies. And, you know, it's very relevant to many people. I said earlier, I was doing a show with young people last night, My Life, My Say. And the top issue that they said for the future was on mental health. So this does resonate with young people. I think it resonates with the wider population now. And we need some good policies. So, you know, policies like a student mental health chart. So when young people are going up to university, which is becoming quite a vulnerable time for them, but that's managed. When young people are moving from CAM services, child and adolescent mental health services, to adult mental health services, that transition is a very dangerous point where people get lost in the system. We need to be championing those areas and talking about them far more, and be the party. When people hear mental health, they go, yeah, it's the Liberal Democrats who are the top party on mental health. That's my ambition. That should be our aim.
Thank you. Thank you for those answers to that very important question. Next up, well, we have time for one more question, and so Vijaya has it, and the question is, given the government's mismanagement of the COVID-19 crisis and the tragic loss of life, and now the potential breakup of the UK as a result, how will you communicate effectively the true nature of this government's performance? And we start here with Ed.
Well, one of the reasons I've led the call for an independent public inquiry is because the shambolic handling by this government of COVID has been a disaster. And it's played into the hands of lots of people on the nationalist side, particularly in Scotland, who've been able to say, look, you know, the SNP have managed this crisis better than the Tories. By the way, not very much actually in practice, but the appearance has been that they've managed it, and that's played into the separatists' hands. So it's a big issue, and I think the best way is to cement the work that I've managed to achieve, where we've got a public commitment from the Prime Minister, first ever he gave, at an answer to a Prime Minister's question that I asked, for an independent inquiry. Now I've followed up on that. I've asked him, okay, we need terms of reference, we need a timetable, we need a chair, and I've made proposals in that area. Because it's so important that we have a proper inquiry, because if it's not under the Inquiries Act 2005, it doesn't have the legal power to call all the people, get all the documents. And that's the level of inquiry we need. And we need it urgently. And I've said to the Prime Minister, we need it in two parts, and well, probably several parts actually, but I've suggested that he could do it in several phases. First, so we can learn the lessons before a second wave or before a new pandemic. And you know, he's running down the clock, and that's really bad. And Layla's APPG is serving a purpose in that regard. But we then need to go on to the longer term inquiry, which I think may take a year and a half. That's what other countries are talking about. And there we really make sure we establish the facts, compare the UK with other countries, learn the lessons, and actually point the finger on who was to blame, who made the wrong decisions. And I think that's absolutely critical. And because we have championed that, we've led that debate, we won the first commitment, will be very well placed over the next year or two in that debate over COVID. And I'm determined to keep the party right front and centre on that inquiry debate.
Thank you. And Leila?
Well, thank you for this question. I mean, the government response to the COVID crisis has been an utter disgrace. We are one of the worst countries in the world on this. Telling NHS patients that they are able to go back to care homes without testing is shocking. Test, trace, isolate is still not working. And people's lives have been cut short as a result of this government's mismanagement. And I'd love to think that everyone already knows about this, but they don't. And yes, we need that judge-led public inquiry. And I've been calling for that too. But my concern was at the end of when Parliament was starting to stop sitting was that the government wouldn't do it in time for a second wave. And guys, I'm sorry to say, look across at what's happening to Europe. How many times do we have to learn this lesson? If it's happening there, it's coming here. It's a matter of weeks. We just don't know how many. It's coming and we have no time to waste. So that is why I pulled together this group. It's an all-party group. We've got nearly 70 MPs and peers. We question people every week. Last week was people who are suffering from long COVID, the long-lasting effects of COVID, bereaved families. The week before that, British Medical Association. We had the NHS Confederation. We've had over 1,000 bits of evidence. And Boris Johnson, in a Prime Minister's question that I asked him, said that he would look at our recommendations. Top of the list of the recommendations that we are making is around government strategy. In other countries, including Scotland, they are aiming for zero COVID, zero community transmission of coronavirus. That, by the way, is the only way to unlock the economy as well. Boris Johnson has not committed to that in England. And despite independent SAGE asking for it, despite the British Medical Association suggesting that that's what they do, they haven't done it yet. This is beyond party politics. This is about saving lives. And I'm really proud of the work that this cross-party group is doing, because by working cross-party on this and by me leading it, that is how people are going to see that the Lib Dems actually do things for the public good. We do things because we care about the bigger issues. And more than that, we actually get stuff done. Thank
you. Well, we've come to the last few minutes of the hustings, and I appreciate all the answers that candidates have given us so far. We're now going to invite both candidates to summarise their pitches in a 2-minute closing statement. As Ed started with the opening statement, it's now Leila's turn to go first, and then followed by Ed. Both candidates have 2 minutes. So, Leila, if you'd like to make your closing remarks, please.
Well, first of all, thank you for so ably chairing. Thank you all for joining us, what is now this afternoon. And now more than ever, we need a strong liberal voice, one that can take the challenge to the Conservatives and move our country forward. We need to tackle inequality through investment in early years and a universal basic income. We need to champion a fair economic recovery that supports small business and protects our environment, stamps out racial discrimination in our workplaces as well. And we need to bring decision-making closer to people by radically decentralizing power away from Westminster. But first, we have to change as a party. And we have to be more representative of the communities that we want to represent. We've got to build our strength as a party and push forward from the mistakes of the past. Steady as she goes won't cut it anymore. And we cannot risk dropping any lower in the polls. With the right strategy, message and leader, I know that we can do better. I know that we can rebuild our council base and become a stronger political force. And my campaigning vision of education, the environment and the economy will and has been getting our voices heard, because we need to rebuild trust again so that we can start winning again across the country. From the grassroots, building campaign forces, winning council seat after council seat, winning whole councils. We are second place in all 4 county councils in the southeast. We are in such a strong position to build on this, because people on the ground need to see why it makes a difference to vote Lib Dem. Because when you vote Lib Dem, you get Lib Dems. And when you get Lib Dems get stuff done. Electing me as our leader sends a clear signal to our voters that we've learned from the mistakes over the last decade, that we've understood where we've gone wrong, and that we are a party moving forward. We need to reinvigorate the party and hold this government to account. So please vote for me in this leadership election. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that closing remark. And Ed.
Thanks for all your questions. I hope I've shown you I have the vision, experience, and judgment to lead the Liberal Democrats. Together, we must tackle the huge challenges our country and our party face. I want to work with you to persuade over those moderate Conservative voters across the South East so we can win. The Thornhill review of the general election shows us there's no quick fix to our party's challenges. But I know that by laying firm foundations, we can shape winning messages which can rebuild a winning party machine. I'm touched by how many great campaigners across the South East are backing me. Catherine Bearder, former MEP for the South East and leader of our European Parliamentary Party. Norman Baker, our former MP for Lewis and one of the party's best Green campaigners. Monica Harding, our amazing candidate in Esher and Walton, who almost beat Dominic Raab. Councillor David Tutt, Eastbourne's successful council leader. Sue Doughty, our former MP for Guildford, and another great environment campaigner. Councillor Paul Follows, Deputy Leader of Waverley Council and PPC for South West Surrey, achieving the largest percentage increase in the Lib Dem vote anywhere in the country. And Judith Bunting, former MEP for the South East, and one of the 13 former MEPs backing me. I'm grateful for their support and the support of so many others. As leader, I will build the Liberal Democrats as a strong, independent party. I want to defeat this awful Tory government. And yes, I'd consider informal understandings with Labour to do that. But I'll keep Labour at arm's length. No pacts, no joint campaigning forces. Because if we did that, we wouldn't win over those moderate Tories whose votes we need to win. So please join the likes of Shirley Williams and Daisy Cooper and back me as leader to lead winning campaigns for a greener economy, a fairer society, and a more caring country. Thank you.
Perfect timing. Thank you very much for your closing remarks. And thank you very much to everyone at home watching with us on this very, very warm day. I don't know about you, but I'm going to the beach for a swim straight away.
I wish.
Thank you to both the candidates and the supporting staff behind the scenes that have put a lot of work into making this a success. I just want to say that whatever happens in the leadership contest, I know that next May we're going to have a great time fighting the Tories across the South East, and I look forward to doing it with whoever's leader and all of our teams, our councillors and our local parties. So thank you very much for coming along, and thank you to the contenders for coming.
Thanks, Ben. Thanks, everybody.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Cheerio.
All good.
Well done, Ben.
Did that go all right?
That went very well. Thank you very much for doing that. I think that was